Sprockets are a fundamental part of a BMX bike. Much like a lot of other components that make up a bike, without a sprocket, it just wouldn't be the same. It's how we propel ourselves forward, and it makes it infinitely easier to do much of the things that we do while riding our BMX bikes, because without it, we'd just be stuck kicking our feet like a scooter. When it comes to BMX sprockets, there is a lot of information that I honestly didn't even consider until thinking about doing this video. So we can go through this one in a logical way, and this was all prompted by Carl Hinckley of Nowhere BMX asking me about different sprocket sizes. So let's start this one off with a question from you guys. What size sprocket are you guys riding in the front, as well as what's in the rear of your BMX bike? I'd like to hear everybody's gear ratios and why, maybe if you have any reasoning why. So a perfect place to start this conversation is talking about gearing and gear ratios. Gearing is simply just the sizes that you decided to put on your bike with the number of teeth in the front and the number of teeth in the back. Gear ratios are what you get when you divide the number of teeth in the front by the number of teeth in the back. For instance, I'm riding a 28 tooth sprocket with a 9 tooth driver. When we take those numbers, the gear ratio that we get is 3.1 repeating, and that means for every one full rotation of my cranks, this wheel is spinning 3.1 repeating times. Those come into play when we're talking about racing and other examples where people really get into the numbers for things. So what do these numbers mean? Well, a higher gear ratio means that it is going to be harder to pedal and take more to get it going at first. But once you get it going, you'll be able to achieve a higher top speed with it because you won't reach the end of what's possible as soon. Now let's take a smaller gear ratio, 25/9. That means it's going to be easier to pedal, which means it's going to be easier to accelerate quicker, but you're going to reach the top end of what's possible faster, so the top speed is actually lower. Now, this comes into play a lot with different genres of cycling, whether it be race, trails, flatland, whatever it might be. In terms of racing, these numbers are huge. We talk about the gear ratios, and let me check my notes here. We also talk about gear inches, and what gear inches are is the gear ratio times the wheel diameter. So that is something that people in racing use to figure out different aspects of what they want to choose for it. But let's talk about like trails, for example, and let's not go super deep into the numbers. Let's just talk about acceleration and how hard something might be to pedal. So in regards to like trails, I got a lot of messages in response to the polls that we're going to talk about in this video about liking to have a larger front sprocket to increase that gear ratio, because if something happens while you're jumping through a line and you need to take a super quick half crank or full crank, you want to be able to gain as much from that as possible, no matter how difficult it is to pedal. So a lot of people said they rode 31/9 or even 33/9 so that they could do just that if they're riding trails and need to take that crank. And basically, it's a safety feature that you're able to give yourself as much speed as you can, as quick as you can, without spinning the tires basically, because you have a lower gear ratio. For example, something like flatland. They are riding sprockets anywhere from like 17 was the lowest number, or 16, all the way up to 24, because they don't need that super fast speed. They just need to be able to move their bikes around. So when it comes to like street riding or all around BMX, I personally like to have a 28/9 because I like the feel of it. And when it comes down to it, for a lot of BMX riders, it's down to the feel and personal preference of what you like when you're pedaling. I don't like a 25/9 and feeling like my cranks are going a million miles an hour and I'm gaining nothing from it. And I've never really tried something like a 30, but for me, 28 seems to be the sweet spot. In regards to the past and where some of these numbers come from today, 44 in the front and 16 in the back was an extremely popular choice by people in the past and sometimes even still today. And the gear ratio for that was 2.75 to 1. Well, when we take 25 and 9 and we find the gear ratio of that, it is 2.77 repeating, or 2.78 to 1, which is very close to that 2.75 of 4416. So to my knowledge, that is where some of this comes from, and it gets you very close to what was traditionally used a lot in BMX. But for some people, it's not quite enough, like me. I go with the 28.9. So another reason why some people decide to change their gearing up and change their sprocket size has to do with the chain and the looseness of the chain and where you place your wheel in the dropout. So let's talk about that now. The reason that sometimes people do this is because they want to ride their rear wheel all the way slammed forward in their dropouts, meaning that if they have a certain sprocket size that they're using, well, it might mean that their chain is way too loose or way too tight, and a way to affect this is by changing the front sprocket on your bike. If it's way too loose with 25.9, then maybe you add 26 or 27, and it tightens the chain up a little bit because there's extra teeth taking up the chain. It's a super interesting element to this. Another reason behind it could be that some people think 25 is too easy to pedal, and some people think 28 is too hard to pedal. So it goes in between. And that brings me to the poll that I did on Instagram, because the question was, if you could ride something other than conventional sprocket sizes like 28 or 25, what would that be? And in this poll, my options that I gave people to choose were 26, 27, 29. 26 got 100 votes, 27 got 218 votes, 29 got 206 votes, and then I think I had a message me if you would like something else option. And so with that, I got a ton of messages from people on sizes that they would want, and winning here was 30 tooth with 40 different messages saying that someone would want to ride a 32 sprocket. But there were a lot of other interesting answers as well in here. The Flatland crowd, they like to have a much smaller sprocket in the front, and there were ranges from 17, 18, 20, 23 had 3 votes, 24, and then on the above 30 side, there was actually a lot of responses here as well. 31, 32, 33, 36, 39, and 44, with 33 having 22 people say that they like to ride that. Now, there was some differences in rear driver sizes that people said throughout this that I didn't record, so I don't have that information, but I thought it was just an interesting interlude in this topic of BMX Sprockets Explained. And now let's talk about some of the different options in regard to BMX sprockets, because you can see here I have just a plain sprocket with nothing on it. There's a bolt hole. There's different options even for mounting that we'll get into in a little bit. So you can see that there's a big difference between these two sprockets. They're actually different versions of the same sprocket. You can see they have a similar design here. That's because this is a guard version of this sprocket and this is the non-guard version. There's a lot of people who like doing different types of grinds, whether it be like a crooked grind or a bottom bracket grind, where your chain is going to be in danger with these types of grinds. So sprocket guards exist to protect from that. And throughout the years, there have been different types of sprocket guards, like bolt-on sprocket guards that the sprocket itself has different areas, and then there's a bolt-on guard that's made to mount to that specifically. There's also different types of racing sprockets where you have like a spider and then you have bolts that attach to the chain ring, is what it's called in that environment. But it's interesting that there's so many different types of things here. There's plastic guard sprockets, and yeah, people have even tried making 3D printed sprockets that I've seen. But in regards to mounting a sprocket, there's a lot of different options that you have to consider with your bike setup, in that sometimes you have to think about the sizing of the inner diameter on the sprocket hole here, where it is possible that with 24 millimeter cranks like these ones, that this sprocket wouldn't even fit onto this spindle. So sprockets usually will come with an adapter so that you can use it on a 19 or a 22, or you use it as it is for a conventional BMX 24 millimeter spindle size, which is actually 15/16. It's a thing, but this is a true 24 millimeter, which means it doesn't work on here. And to show you how you go around this is where we introduce spline drive. So spline drive sprockets are for cranks like these that do not have a boss for a sprocket bolt, meaning that you can't install a sprocket like this one onto here, because if you put this on, all you're gonna do is pedal your cranks around and go nowhere because the sprocket won't move. Might be great to have a fake free coaster, but not gonna be great for getting anywhere. That's where spline drive comes in. So spline drive oftentimes uses an adapter like the one that you're seeing here that matches the splines on the spindle of the cranks and then goes into the sprocket in a groove that's machined out so that you can use it without needing a bolt. And that is what I'm using here. Some cranks on lower model complete bikes will have a little like nub that sticks out of the crank that just goes into a groove on the sprocket. And this works. Essentially, all you're trying to do is fix the sprocket in a fixed point so that when you pedal the pedals, it moves forward. Another topic when it comes to BMX sprockets is material. Material is huge when it comes to guard sprockets. I guess material could even be huge in any sprocket when we're talking about this. So when we're talking about material, typically it is either 6000 series aluminum or 7000 series aluminum. And a 6000 series is more malleable, which means it's more susceptible to damage if you're grinding on your sprocket or bashing the sprocket onto different things. And a 7000 series is harder, which means it holds up better to those types of situations. So when it comes to a guard sprocket, usually it's better to have a 70-75 material, which means that it'll hold up longer and take less damage over time whenever you're bashing it or grinding it off of different things. Same goes for non-guard sprockets. Obviously, if it's a harder material, it's gonna hold up a little bit better, but there are reasons that people choose to go with 6000 series aluminum for guard sprockets or normal sprockets at that, whether it be material availability or ease of machining, things of that nature. But it's something that you may want to pay attention to if you're going to buy a guard sprocket and you want it to last as long as possible. Well, then you may look for a 7000 series option. I've also seen, like from RNC BMX, who makes these cranks, he has made a couple different titanium sprocket options, including a guard sprocket made of titanium. And now we get into talking about the deep nuance to BMX sprockets. I'm not going to go super in depth on this because honestly, my knowledge on it is limited, but there is a reason why people, even in racing today, pick different combinations of front and rear sizes in order to achieve a specific gearing ratio, or what I believe they call rollout. And it's something that plays a big part when you're talking about BMX racing at the elite level, where any advantage you can find will be a big advantage for you. This is something that a lot of people consider. I suppose we could touch on chain alignment real quick because we're talking about sprocket, and it goes in with where your sprocket aligns with your rear driver, and sizing does have an impact on this as well. If your sprocket is too big, then that means you're gonna have to run it further and further out so that it doesn't hit this chainstay tube on your frame, which can offset your chain alignment. And this is something to consider when you're building your bike, because the better your chain alignment is, the longer your chain's gonna last and the smoother the pedaling is going to be. So when you have a 28 or a 30 or a 33, your chain alignment may be sacrificed, as BMX doesn't think as deeply when it comes to chain alignment as some other aspects of cycling do. And for all of these reasons, I don't even run a drive side spacer on my bottom bracket. I just put a couple washers in there to get it as close to the frame as I possibly can to give myself the best chain alignment possible. To circle back to the question that I asked all of you guys in the beginning, and if you haven't answered yet, get down in the comments and answer, what size sprocket do you ride? I actually did a follow-up poll on Instagram asking exactly that because I thought it'd be really interesting to include it in a video like this one, whether it be for companies who might see this to hear what size sprockets people are riding the most, or just out of curiosity in general. So the numbers were as followed. 44 people said they ride other options than the ones that I listed. That would be the 33s, the 36, the 39, the 44, the 23, all of these numbers. And then 114 people said they ride a 32 sprocket. 189 people said they ride a 25. And then 303 people said they ride a 28-2 sprocket. So that is far over 500 responses, which feels like a pretty good sample size. And you can see that the ratio of people who ride 28 tooth is much over half of that. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, BMX sprockets and almost everything about them are all about personal preference. Whether it's changing up the sizing to affect how hard or easy your bike is to pedal, or how fast or slow it can accelerate to those top speeds that are affected by the sizing, or if it's just tinkering with the sizing to impact whether or not you're able to slam your wheel in your dropouts and have the chain to the tension that you like it, or just changing up the materials, guard, non-guard, spline drive, non-spline drive. It's literally all down to personal preference. And that's why I asked you what you're riding on your bike in terms of sprocket size in the front, amount of teeth in the back, and what sprocket in general you might be riding. So answer that in the comments down below. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer those down there as well. I want to say thank you for watching. And if you want to see another BMX Explained video, playlist on the screen right now. I know it's been quite some time since I've made one, but here it is. Maybe we'll make more soon. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.